Hey there, Criticult. Welcome back. Let's discuss Ant-Man and the Quantumania Wasp. That's what it's called, right? Spoiler-free review. Have no fear. Listen here. What did we like about the movie? First off, I loved the cast. We won't get into too many individuals because that might lead into that icky spoiler territory, but I will say this, that Jonathan Majors as Kang is absolutely phenomenal. He's going to continue to be great, not only in whatever he's going to do with the future of the MCU, but I believe Creed 3 looks very interesting, but you're not here for that, so never mind. Just know that the cast is great. I think Michelle Pfeiffer plays her role very well. I don't have any major issues with the cast, honestly. There's not even anyone that I would call out specifically in that regard. And other things I would say that I liked, just Kang in general. Now, this is a bit biased, this is a bit personal. Always been a favorite of mine, a personal favorite in the comic book character spectrum. So, admittedly, I have that bias, but I thought the armor looked cool as far as the CGI goes, and I didn't love everything that was done with the effects or the graphics, so I will give credit where it was due. Keep an eye out on the scenes that include Kang's armor and just look for some of the little nuances in there. I really enjoyed that. And the other thing I like is the overall storyline of the MCU. So I like where this movie is going. I like where it's taking us to, or at least where we can all theorize that it's going to be taking us for the time being. Now let's get into the bad. What are the things that we didn't like as much about this movie? Well, the first one on my list I have to save for our spoiler review, so let me skip that one. But this felt like a paint-by-numbers plot at times. There's a lot of stuff that's pretty choreographed that is, again, just damn near stereotypical. You have a lot of tropes in this movie that you might shake your head at. I found myself frustrated with some of them, absolutely. I think there are some plot holes from the first couple of films that I don't know if I'm going to spend the time to really work through at this point when it comes to the MCU. I notice them. They may frustrate me, they being the plot holes, but whatever, man. I'm not here to absolutely critique all of that stuff, especially the more time travel-y things might get, the more multiversal it gets, the more there may come the giant reset button that gets to make all of it make sense anyway. So I'm not going to get too caught up into some of those plot holes, but I do think they were there, and they make certain character behaviors in older films maybe questionable. So just calling what I see. And I also felt there were too many jokes at the wrong time. Now, I will only say this. I think there are times in movies where a levity break is a good thing. You know, you just got through some tension, maybe give everybody a minute to breathe and relax for a minute before we ratchet the tempo back up. However, there are moments when you need to be building the tension up to something, and I think those are times when jokes can be poorly used or mistimed, and it kind of flattens the tension that you were building. It takes the air out of the room. It's contradictory. It's counterproductive. It's not what you want to be doing. So I did find a few of those. Of course, I mean, you're coming to an Ant-Man movie for some humor. I unfortunately think that they missed the mark on a couple of those. So let's get to the ugly. Some things that I just I don't know if they're necessarily bad, but they didn't resonate with me personally. Some of the visual choices in the quantum realm, I will spare you any of those particulars, to be honest, because if you haven't watched this movie and you're debating it, I don't want to spoil any of that. But there are some things in the quantum realm I think could have been done better, but I understand the challenge when you're trying to conceptualize things in the quantum realm. Difficult for a lot of people to conceptualize, myself included. So we'll take that with a grain of salt if you must. The film in general at times feels too Rick and Morty-esque to me. Now that makes sense considering that they share some creative ties, but that might not be a personal issue for you. There were times where it felt less MCU and more Rick and Morty. Now, we'll dive more deeply into that discussion in the spoiler review. So if you have some comments, if you're thinking, I do know some things that Rick and Morty borrowed some things from the MCU, or not from the MCU, but from Marvel. And so I don't, people might get their wires crossed. So we'll discuss all of that in the spoiler deep dive. But the last thing I'll say is if you don't like the Rick and Morty feel of it, it also has a big Star Wars vibe to me, this movie. Down to costume choices in certain scenes. Felt very Star Wars-y. Felt much like a Star War. But again, that might not be a problem for you. I didn't necessarily hate it at every point. I just felt like there was a lot of it. So that's my critique there. But overall, this didn't feel like an Ant-Man movie to me, more like a Star Wars, as I mentioned. These later or more recent MCU films, we've had a couple of these more spectacle, like they're trying to do big events more frequently instead of having the Infinity War Endgame. We had, of course, Spider-Man and how big of an event that was with all the multiversal crossovers, and then Doctor Strange as well, which again, maybe not quite to the same extent, but it did open up a whole bunch of things with different dimensions and universes and cameos and all that good stuff. So it felt like that again. Sometimes I think the greater story in MCU lore gets propped up at the individual movies, at their detriment. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. But I will just say that I didn't feel like an Ant-Man movie didn't feel quite as grounded or as personal as they do. Wasn't quite as funny as they usually are. Was missing maybe some characters from previous movies that you would have enjoyed to spend some time with in this one. But I will say this, I still have some hope for the upcoming Marvel phase, but I no longer think that I'll be going to any of these movies on opening night until I see a little more progress. And with that, I will give this my final grade after the first viewing, which I did catch a matinee to save some money on. I had given it a 6 out of 10. After going back and watching it a second time, being able to follow along and look at more of the details of what was going on, I did lose appreciation for the movie upon a second viewing, which can happen. But to me, I think rewatchability is another big point. So 5.5 out of 10 for me on this one. But let us know your thoughts either in a comment below, or you can find us on Twitter at criticult_. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, all of that stuff. If you enjoyed it, it really helps the channel. And of course, turn the bell notifications on if you are interested in being notified when the full spoiler review comes out. We'll be working on it right away, immediately following the uploading of this podcast. So in the meantime, check our archives. We've got some preview reviews and some full lengthy discussion reviews with the likes of my dear friends Noah and Sean. So be sure to check those out. And again, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care.